Halloween, 2011. A quiet suburban town in southern Canada. The streets were painted orange and red, lit by porch lights and the occasional flicker of a pumpkin's smile. Children ran from house to house, their voices echoing through the crisp October air. Laughter, candy wrappers, the scent of burning candles. It was an ordinary Halloween night until one man arrived. Witnesses would later describe him the same way. Tall, silent, cloaked in black. His mask, a perfect skull, reflected the warm glow of the streetlights like porcelain. He carried a scythe, not plastic, not foam, but polished steel. At first, no one thought much of him. After all, this was Halloween, a night when the grotesque was expected, even celebrated. He walked slowly through the streets, past the crowds and the laughter. The scythe's blade caught the moonlight with each step, a thin silver crescent cutting through the dark. No one spoke to him. No one asked where he was going. At 9:47 p.m., according to later testimony, he entered the house on Elmview Street, the location of that year's largest neighborhood Halloween party. The music was loud, the lights were dim, and the guests were deep in a drunken haze of costumes and cheap horror. Someone saw him at the door. They thought he was a late arrival, maybe a friend of a friend. "Nice costume," someone said. "You really went all out." He didn't respond. He simply nodded once and stepped inside. The home's interior was decorated like a low-budget haunted house, fake cobwebs, orange bulbs, a fog machine puffing weakly from the corner. He moved through it like a shadow that didn't belong, brushing past witches and pirates and superheroes. Some guests tried to speak to him. None remembered his voice. At approximately 10:15 p.m., several guests recalled the man standing perfectly still in the center of the dance floor. The crowd around him kept moving, laughing, shouting, spilling drinks. He did not dance. He did not move. At first, people assumed it was a joke, maybe performance art, maybe a prank. Someone shouted, "Hey, Death, lighten up!" Another tossed him a drink. He didn't react. Then, slowly, he raised his scythe, not threateningly, but as if making a toast to no one in particular. That gesture would later be remembered in every witness statement, because it was the last movement he ever made. At 10:19 p.m., he collapsed. The thud was lost under the music. A few people laughed, clapped, assuming it was part of some elaborate stunt. Someone even took a photo. It shows a blurred figure lying on the floor, surrounded by red and orange lights, people still dancing nearby. It looks staged. It looks almost perfect. But he didn't get up. Minutes passed. The music kept playing. The laughter continued. Then, one by one, people began to notice the stillness, the way his hands were clenched, the way the scythe had rolled under a nearby table. Someone said, "He's really good at this." Another said, "Wait, is he breathing?" At 10:26 p.m., the music stopped. A woman knelt beside him. She tried to shake his shoulder, but his body was stiff, colder than it should have been. She touched his neck, then screamed. The laughter turned to confusion, then fear. Someone called emergency services. The operator's log would later record the call as follows: male, approximately mid-30s, unconscious, possibly not breathing, costume death. Paramedics arrived 8 minutes later. They found the man still on the floor, surrounded by party guests standing in stunned silence. The mask was still on his face. When they tried to remove it, they realized it wasn't strapped. It was pressed against his skin, as though it had fused with sweat and time. When they finally pulled it free, several witnesses turned away. The man's face was pale, lips discolored, purple at the edges, eyes wide open, staring, unblinking. He was gone. The official report lists the time of death as 10:32 p.m. The cause? Cardiac arrest. But nothing about this case felt routine. The coroner's early notes mention unusual skin temperature, as though the body had cooled faster than normal. No drugs, no alcohol in his blood. He was, for all practical purposes, a healthy man, and yet he was gone. Police struggled with the basics. No ID, no phone, no wallet. His fingerprints matched, no record. Even his costume seemed deliberately anonymous. A handmade cloak, thread-stitched, no manufacturer tag. A steel scythe, crafted from welded tubing, sharpened but clean. Whoever he was, he came prepared. Witness interviews only deepened the mystery. One woman swore she'd seen him earlier that night standing at the corner of Maple and 3rd, just watching children trick-or-treat. Another claimed he'd appeared in the background of a photo taken hours before the party, standing behind a group of costumed teenagers, motionless. The timestamp on that image reads 7:12 p.m., several blocks away. Detective Harris, lead investigator, later described the case as the strangest open file of my career. He recalled entering the crime scene residence at 11:15 p.m. The guests were still outside, some crying, others smoking nervously. Inside, the air smelled of fog machine chemicals and spilled wine. On the floor, a scythe, a plastic cup, and a faint smear of red, not blood punch. There was no sign of struggle, no bruising, no defensive marks. The man had simply stopped. The body temperature logs show a drop of 9 degrees in under 20 minutes. Physiologically impossible without external cause. They searched nearby homes, questioned every guest. Not a single person recognized him by name. No one recalled him arriving by car. No one saw him leave. Every clue led nowhere. The following morning, a forensic team cataloged the contents of his cloak. In the inner lining, they found one item, a folded piece of paper. On it, written in neat, deliberate handwriting, were the words, "It's my turn now." The ink was smudged by moisture, but the message was unmistakable. When local media picked up the story, the headlines were predictable. Death comes to Halloween party. Mystery man dies in costume. For a week, the town was flooded with reporters. But as quickly as the attention came, it faded. There were no updates, no answers. By early November, the coroner closed the case with the classification, natural causes sudden cardiac arrest. Detective Harris disagreed privately. He would later tell a podcaster in 2016, "We see heart attacks every day. This wasn't that." Something about his body felt drained, like the life had left faster than it should. The scythe was sealed as evidence and stored in a climate-controlled room. 2 months later, the steel had tarnished, blackened around the edge, as if burned. No one could explain why. In 2012, the DO file was archived under case #10-H, but locals still whispered about it, the man with the perfect death costume, who came from nowhere and left just as quietly. Every Halloween since, residents of Elmview Street claim to see a dark figure standing near the same house, silent, watching the trick-or-treaters pass. When approached, he disappears. Only the faint reflection of a scythe blade remains just enough to catch the moonlight. Officially, the file was closed. Unofficially, it wasn't. When the local police handed the evidence to the regional bureau, several anomalies were logged but never released to the public. One of them was the tape, a handheld camcorder recording from inside the party. It was found 2 days later by a neighbor cleaning her yard. The camera had been dropped in the bushes, its lens cracked but memory card intact. The footage runs for exactly 37 minutes. The first 20 are unremarkable. Guests laughing, someone yelling over loud, music, people posing for selfies. But at timestamp 2043, the man in the death costume enters the frame. He doesn't speak. He walks slowly through the crowd, pausing near the camera. The lens distorts his mask, making the grin appear wider, the eyes darker. For a brief moment, he turns his head directly toward the camera. Then the image flickers one frame of static. When the feed clears, he's gone. But in the reflection of a nearby mirror, a faint blur remains. Investigators described it as a motion artifact, but digital analysis later found that the reflection moved in a separate direction from everyone else in the shot, like two overlapping realities. At 28:05, the collapse is caught on film. Guests cheer, some laughing, some clapping. Then, silence. The camera shakes as someone sets it down, pointed toward the floor. For 15 seconds, It records nothing but shoes, people stepping forward, then backward. The last 5 seconds capture a faint whisper, barely audible under the noise. He's here. Experts later concluded it was background interference, possibly someone outside. But no one in the footage's audio range appears to speak. The file was archived under restricted evidence. Detective Harris noted in his personal addendum, audio distortion inconsistent with environmental noise. Unknown source. Retain for analysis. When the footage leaked online years later, it spread quickly through horror forums. Most believed it was fake, but residents of Elmview recognized the house, the people, even the song playing in the background. It was real. Another piece of unreleased evidence came from a security camera across the street. At 9:44 p.m., it recorded a car pulling up a dark sedan, no license plate visible. At 9:47, the Reaper appears on camera, walking toward the party. But at 9:46, one frame earlier, the car door is still open, and no one steps out. Investigators reviewed the footage dozens of times. There is no visible transition, no moment where a figure exits. The man simply appears in the next frame, already moving away. When asked about the inconsistency, a technician described it as an optical anomaly, possible camera dropout. But according to metadata, there were no dropped frames. The transition was clean. Whatever happened, it wasn't an error. By the end of 2012, the case had developed a reputation even among law enforcement. Officers joked about the death costume guy in training sessions, but some refused to speak about it altogether. Harris later admitted he kept the case file in his desk drawer long after it was archived. He said he dreamt of the man standing in his office, mask gleaming under the fluorescent light, silent, waiting. In 2015, a junior officer reopened the file for a cold case review. When she requested the scythe for reanalysis, the evidence locker showed it had been signed out 2 years earlier under Harris's name. He had retired the year before. When contacted, he denied ever removing it. The signature on the log matched his handwriting exactly. By the mid-2010 seconds, the story of the man who dressed as death had turned from a police mystery into modern folklore. Paranormal podcasts, YouTube channels, and Reddit threads picked it apart, every detail, every timestamp, every rumor. But the most interesting developments didn't come from believers. They came from people who had seen him again. In 2014, a Halloween block party was held 3 towns over in an area known as Fairgrove Estates. Footage from a smartphone shows a dark figure standing near the food tables. Same cloak, same scythe, same bone-white mask. The video lasts 21 seconds. At the 10-second mark, someone pans the camera toward him. By the time it refocuses, he's gone. Skeptics called it a hoax. But police dispatch records confirm that a 911 call was made that same night. A resident reporting a man in a death costume staring through her window. Officers responded, but found nothing. In the report margin, one officer scribbled a note. Weird porch light went out right before we got there. A year later, in another province, a security guard at a community center captured footage of a figure walking across the parking lot at 2:17 a.m. The motion sensor lights turned on, except they didn't light him. Every other part of the frame was illuminated, but his body remained a silhouette. The guard quit the next day. Online, theories multiplied. Some believe the man had faked his death, a stunt gone wrong that turned into legend. Others claimed it was a form of collective delusion, the result of internet hysteria. But those who had seen the footage, the real uncut evidence, said otherwise. Digital analysts studying the original video noticed an anomaly in the final frame of the collapse sequence. When enhanced, the image revealed a faint figure standing behind the man. In the death costume, taller, thinner, its face featureless. No one at the party remembered seeing anyone like that. The shape was translucent, like motion blur, except it wasn't blurred in the same direction as the rest of the image. Harris's notebook contained a final entry dated February 2016. The mask. The body was cold. but the inside
No,
the part
sir.
under the mask was warm.
We've never seen
How?
him before.
He died a year later of natural causes. His family found the case file still in his desk drawer, along with the scythe, wrapped in cloth. The blade had darkened completely, as if burned. When forensic teams examined it, they found microscopic traces of human tissue embedded along the edge, not from the original victim, but from someone else. No DNA match was ever identified. Since then, every few years, the story resurfaces. Each time, there's a new photograph, a new sighting. One taken in 2018 shows a Halloween parade, a crowd of smiling children and parents, and far in the background, that same black silhouette, holding something long and curved. It looks almost painted into the frame. In 2021, a Reddit user posted an image claiming to show the death costume man reflected in a store window during a Halloween festival. Within an hour, the account was deleted, but the image remains archived. Metadata confirms it was taken at 10:19 p.m., exactly 10 years to the minute after the original collapse. Coincidence or design? No one can say. But if you pause the image and adjust the brightness, something strange happens. The figure's mask isn't white. It's gray, with faint cracks around the eyes, like porcelain that's been used before. Officially, the file remains unsolved. Unofficially, it's one of those cases that no one in law enforcement wants to touch again. When new recruits ask about it, veterans just shake their heads. Some laugh it off, others don't. The final report, dated November 2016, contains a short summary by Deputy Chief Lionel Crow. It reads, "The subject's identity could not be determined. No next of kin, no financial trace, no personal records. Cause of death, undetermined cardiac event. Case closed, pending new evidence." But at the bottom of the page, in handwriting that wasn't Crow's, a note appears. He didn't come to die. He came to take his place. There's no record of who wrote it. When forensic archivists reopened the physical evidence box in 2018, the cloak was missing. The storage seal was intact, no sign of forced entry, no administrative record of removal. The scythe remained, wrapped in its cloth, but the metal surface had warped slightly, as though exposed to extreme heat. Infrared scans revealed faint etchings along the handle. They weren't letters. They were fingerprints, hundreds of them, overlapping, each one too small to belong to a living human hand. Some speculate it was a fabrication, a morbid prank by officers tired of unsolved mysteries. But a 2019 internal memo from the Evidence Division warned staff to avoid extended exposure to item 1109H due to unexplained skin irritation and minor electrical discharge. Even now, more than a decade later, the house on Elmview Street still stands. New owners report no strange activity, except one peculiar thing. Every Halloween night, their porch light flickers at exactly 10:19 p.m. It lasts for 7 seconds, then stops. Electricians found nothing wrong. A documentary crew visited the site in 2022. They filmed for 3 nights, interviewing neighbors and local police. On the final night, their audio equipment picked up a faint metallic scrape like steel, dragging across pavement, even though no one was outside. When the crew reviewed the footage, the timestamp showed 10 hours, 19 minutes, and 4 seconds. And there, in a single frame, reflected in a window behind the interviewer, was a dark silhouette, cloaked, still, watching. Analysts who examined the image noted that the reflection did not match the lighting in the room. It was darker, a shade too black, a void in the color spectrum. But the most unsettling detail was what the reflection faced. Not the camera, not the crew. It was turned toward the interviewer as if listening. Some say the legend persists because it feels unfinished. Because we can't accept randomness in horror. A man dying in a costume that mirrored death itself, it's too poetic, too precise to be chance. But sometimes, truth doesn't need to be supernatural to terrify us. Sometimes it's enough to know that someone can exist entirely outside the record. A person without history, without name, whose story begins and ends on the same night. And maybe, just maybe, death really did wear his own disguise. Every Halloween, people tell this story again on forums, in podcasts, around campfires. They talk about the man who came to the party and never left. The man who wore death's face and then became it. And, if you listen closely, sometime around midnight, when the laughter fades and the last porch light goes out, you might hear it too. The faint sound of steel dragging across the pavement, getting closer